emphasized at every area in every level of our lives. We can see it in businesses, educational and religious institutions, the military, government agencies, and even in NGOs. For me, this is evidence as to how pervasive this concept is. The leadership development industry is a colossal industry, and it has an impact on everything from business performance to organizational culture. And considering how important leadership is to the organization and considering how many offerings there are to choose from, we need to ask this question: are we really getting it right? Spoiler alert, as if you could already guess by the title of this episode, my answer is no. I'm Jawn Lam, and on today's episode of the Durable Leadership Podcast, we're going to have a little conversation about why I believe the leadership development industry fails to deliver on what we really need. Let's get to work.
Navigating business politics, mapping your path to power. You're listening to the Durable Leadership Podcast. Here's your host, Jawn Lam.
When it comes to cultivating the next generation of executives, companies worldwide are splashing the cash, investing billions. Yeah, you heard me right. That's billions with a B. They're investing billions annually, all in the hopes of developing the next Karen Lynch from CVS or the next Tim Cook from Apple. But what does this mean for you? If you're a leader, it means you have a lot of options when it comes to choosing a leadership development program. There are programs available for all budgets and all levels of experience. If you're not a leader yet, it means that there are a lot of demand for leaders with strong leadership skills. Investing in your leadership development can give you a competitive edge in the market. No matter where you are in your career, the leadership development industry is a valuable resource. By investing in your leadership skills, you can position yourself for success in the workplace. The leadership development industry is enormous and it's growing fast. How big is it and how fast is it growing? Well, in 2022, the estimated market size was over $67 billion, and it's projected to grow to over $179 billion by 2032. That's a lot of money being spent on training and developing leaders. There are a few reasons for the leadership development industry's rapid growth. First, businesses are realizing that investing in leadership development is essential for their success. In a world that's constantly changing, businesses need leaders who are agile, adaptable, and innovative. Leadership development programs can help businesses develop these skills in their leaders. Second, the rise of the gig economy and, more recently, and probably more prominently, the rise of the remote workforce is creating a demand for new leadership skills. In the past, leaders were typically responsible for managing teams of employees who worked in the same location. But today, many leaders are managing teams that are spread out all over the world. They need to be able to lead and motivate their teams remotely, and they need to be able to build trust and rapport with team members who they may never meet in person. Leadership development programs can help leaders develop these skills. Third, the leadership development industry is benefiting from the increasing availability of online mobile learning platforms. These platforms make it easier and more affordable for businesses to provide leadership development training to their employees. Here are some additional stats to put the size of the leadership development industry into perspective. Companies spend an average of $1,200 per employee on leadership development training each year. But keep this in mind, that's the reported average spend on all employees. But we know that not everyone in the company gets the privilege of having that kind of investment spent on them. What typically happens is a small group of hand-picked individuals are selected to participate in an executive development program. And those programs can be in the neighborhood of $20,000 to $30,000 per person per year. The North American leadership development market is the largest market, accounting for over 40% of the global market share. The Asia-Pacific leadership development market is the fastest growing market with an expected compounded annual growth rate of 12% from 2021 to 2026. But here's the thing. The size of this industry isn't just about money. The sheer number of leadership philosophies, methods, and techniques being thrown around is staggering. Ever heard of transformational leadership? How about servant leadership? Or what about authentic leadership? Somewhere in my library of notes from business school, I have a document detailing the unique characteristics and use cases of 37 different leadership styles, and there are many more. Each approach has its own set of courses, books, gurus, and communities, all championing its efficacy. And while some of these programs offer meaningful value, many of them are just shiny wrappers with nothing substantial inside. Because the number of offerings is so huge, having a framework to separate the wheat from the chaff among all these options is vitally important. Have you ever wondered how effective leadership training truly is? With its massive presence globally, it's no surprise that the leadership development industry holds an undeniable significance in our personal, professional, and civic lives. The importance of leadership training is such a universally accepted idea that we can see it at all levels of our education system, from student council programs in our primary schools all the way up through dedicated degree programs in our graduate schools. Now, speaking of higher education institutions, many of them place explicit emphasis on leadership in their mission statement. They're making leadership skills a focal point, championing the idea of effective leadership in their degree courses and even dedicating entire centers to the subject. Let me give you some examples. The Harvard Business School has this in their mission statement. It says, to educate leaders who make a difference in the world. The mission statement of the Stanford Graduate School of Business says this: our mission is to create ideas that deepen and advance our understanding of management, and with those ideas, to develop innovative, principled, and insightful leaders who change the world. My alma mater, the Pepperdine Grazie-Dio School of Business, has this as their mission statement. We aim to equip our students to lead lives of purpose, service, and leadership. Now, moving over to the corporate realm, the time, money, and resources invested in leadership are astounding. The corporate training and development sector is proof of this. A significant portion of employee learning and development, with an especially thick slice for managerial and supervisory content, is spent on, you guessed it, leadership education and development. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Dive deeper into the actual topics and subjects that they're teaching, and you'll find leadership development theories to be the driving foundational force that shapes the mission-critical disciplines of decision-making, resource allocation, stakeholder management, and organizational governance. Now, did you see it? Did you see the commonality in all of those disciplines? If you've been a longtime listener of the Durable Leadership Podcast, you may have said power structures. And if you did, winner, winner, chicken dinner. Power structures. Leadership plays a paramount role here. And it's not just in the organizational hierarchy. It's not just about titles and positions. It's about understanding the interplay between formal lines of authority and informal methods of influence. It's about accumulating top-down legitimacy while not neglecting bottom-up mandates. It's about managing the expectations of your stakeholders, forging coalitions with your peers, and inspiring your team to build towards a brighter future. It's all rooted in leadership, my friends. We've discussed the nuanced interplay between leadership and power structures and how leadership permeates every facet of an organization, from the boardroom to the break room. Yet, leadership's reach isn't confined to mere power dynamics or political games of a few individuals. It's intricately woven into the very fabric of the organization, influencing every corner and even molding the entire ecosystem. Leadership also extends its reach to foster innovation, determine employee satisfaction, set expectations on compliance, and even shape the collective definition of ethics and morality. With such a profound impact on organizational constructs, it's no wonder that leadership remains an ever-relevant topic in today's world. Now, before we move on, let's remember, leadership isn't just about being at the helm. It's about leveraging the existing power structures to create a culture that makes a difference for your organization. All right, for those of you who are bored of this topic and have only stuck around because you love the sound of my silky, dulcet voice, you're probably thinking, these days, leadership has become a stupid corporate buzzword and has lost all of its meaning. First of all, I don't blame you. I love the sound of my own voice too. And second, well, I can't really argue with you on that. I mean, hop onto Google Scholar and you'll find a whopping 2.6 million entries about it. That's 2.6 million academic sources on the concept of leadership. But if you go over to Google proper and do a search, you'll be met with a staggering 148 million links. 148 million links on the topic of leadership. And don't even get me started on Amazon. Go over there and do a search and you'll be met with over 117,000 book entries just waiting to tell you how to be the perfect leader. But if leadership is so well covered, why am I saying the leadership development industry still misses the mark? Now, let's explore a little bit further. Leadership is intricately linked with all facets of the organization, right? We just talked about that. If we really peel back the layers, leadership is less about cookie-cutter definitions and more about navigating the ever-changing landscape of the dynamic alliances, unstated interests, shifting motivations, and hidden agendas. In other words, an effective executive is one who knows how to be politically savvy in all expressions of their leadership. Yes, all. Because sometimes, even leadership is less about building bridges and more about neutralizing adversaries. That's how you get the job done. You're not going to get that from a book of warm, fuzzy, feel-good sayings. At its core, leadership is about influence and control. How do you influence the right people? How do you control the strategic decision-making processes that result in organizational effectiveness? How do you build alliances that further your agenda? This isn't the fluffy stuff of motivational posters. It's the meaty stuff of real-world dynamics. We talked about the importance of leadership in the context of organizational effectiveness. In other words, there is enormous demand for this type of training and development. And we discussed the enormous size of the leadership development industry. In other words, there is an enormous supply of this type of education and consultation. Now, let me give you my 3 pet peeves about the leadership development industry and the flawed expectations of the consumers who buy those services. My hope is that through these critiques, you'll get to see 3 things. First, you'll see the enormous blind spot of the leadership development industry. In other words, the topic that almost no one in the leadership development industry explicitly addresses. Then you'll get to see specific examples of the 2 major leadership failures. Now, irrespective of my specific examples that I'm about to share with you or my specific pet peeves, these 2 major leadership failures are indeed universal failures committed by all failed leaders in all industries at all levels. Bold claim, I know. I'm hoping that'll get you to stick around a little bit longer. If you forget everything else in this episode, except these 3 things, if you just remember these 3 things, I will have done my job. Okay, let's start here. Here's a critical point to consider. We all have this shared romance of leadership, or more specifically, we all have this shared lionization of this unitary leader. We have this fantastical belief in leadership's elevated role as a society. The perceived impact of leadership is often based on the heroic portrayal of leaders in popular culture and media. There's this social construction we have collectively created where we credit or blame, leaders for organizational successes or failures. If a company is doing well economically, you can bet that there will be a ton of mentions about this stellar leader. If a company underperforms, you can bet that there will be no shortage of opinions castigating that leader. But is it really all down to them, or are we just constructing an inflated sense of personal control for them? This fantasy of the singular apex executive neglects the reality that an organization's success is the product of countless individuals with specialized talents, all coordinating their efforts and resources toward the common goal. Similarly, the blame placed on one individual for an organization's downfall often overlooks the intricate web of internal dynamics, politics, and even pre-existing momentum. All of that can hinder even the most visionary leader from realizing their objectives. The conventional understanding of leadership is based on a simplified account of personal control. Leaders are often portrayed as heroic individuals with unique skills and qualities that enable them to inspire and motivate others to achieve great things. This view of leadership ignores the complex social dynamics that shape the organization's performance. The main problem with this simplified understanding of leadership is that it places too much emphasis on the individual and not enough emphasis on the context in which leadership takes place. Leadership is not simply about what an individual does. It's also about the relationships that leaders have with their constituents, the relationships they have with the corporate culture in which they operate, and the relationship that they have with the broader social, economic, and regulatory forces that shape the organization where they work. In reality, the impact of a leader's direct effort is often limited. Leaders are constrained by the resources at their disposal, the capabilities of their team, and the established policies under which they operate. In other words, no single individual has full control over all resources, all talents, and all decision-making authority to fulfill their remit, and rightly so. Consequently, and this may be already obvious to some of you, but I need to say this so it's clear for everyone. Consequently, a leader's success directly depends on how well they can marshal the cooperation, coordination, and collaboration of their principals, their partners, their peers, and their personnel, in spite of the presence of competing interests of those principals, partners, peers, and personnel. The nuanced interplay of power dynamics and political maneuvering within an organization is an essential ingredient to understand how the organization works. We need to understand this, and we need to understand this as a way of navigating our organization, just as the laws of physics are real in the tangible world. Just as a scientist or an engineer doesn't deny the reality of gravity when they are designing a structure like a building or a bridge, or when they're designing a flight path like for a 747 or a rocket to Mars. The leadership development programs should also not overlook the omnipresence of internal politics and power dynamics. Sadly, many conventional leadership programs present a sanitized version of organizational life, focusing solely on broad leadership qualities, communication strategies, and some sort of ethereal high-level decision-making. This results in leaders who may excel in traditional skills, but are ill-equipped to manage the undercurrents of office politics, how they can influence the battles of opinions, and even how they negotiate the give and take that often determines the true organizational outcomes. By not recognizing and addressing these realities as fundamentally as gravity is recognized in physics, these leadership programs set up their participants for potential pitfalls and blindsides in the complex, multi-dimensional chess game of our modern organizational dynamics. So my first critique is this: many leadership development programs fail to address the need for deploying political tactics and strategies. They will not even touch the conversation about how power is a necessary force inside of organizations. And for that, they shy away from discussing politics altogether. Many of them treat the term office politics as a dirty word. I'm here to tell you it's not. If you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you know that what we want you to do is learn about power dynamics in organizations using politics to accumulate and consolidate power so that you can better serve your organization and execute on the vision that you believe is the right version of the future for your organization. Now that I've said that, let's cut to the chase. Let's talk about the failures that are the results of the leadership development industry. Here's an example of the industry's first major leadership failure, and that is the overselling of the meritocracy. Now, while hard work and technical skills are necessary, I never said they were not necessary. They are necessary. They are far from sufficient in your pursuit of becoming an effective executive. Painting success as a wholly self-made endeavor sidesteps real-world complexities like building coalitions, forging alliances, managing stakeholders, and maintaining strategic focus in the face of competing interests. Self-made success is an illusion. Many leadership development programs often hone in on individual skills like charisma, intelligence, or resilience. Great, that's fine, but that narrative oversimplifies the reality. It feeds the belief that climbing the corporate ladder is solely within your control. Here's the unvarnished truth. No one is an island in the corporate world. The leadership development industry is also riddled with misleading language pitfalls. Phrases like rising to the top, or getting ahead, or making it. These phrases can subtly perpetuate the meritocratic myths. They suggest a straightforward path to success, glossing over the very real hurdles and power dynamics that are at play. Speaking of a straightforward path, that's another bugbear of mine. It's the idea that career progression is a neat, linear path. In reality, it's more akin to a web of opportunities, influenced by timing, relationships, and yes, sometimes that even means making difficult political decisions. On top of all of that, the leadership development industry has an insatiable appetite for triumphant stories. Let me tell you, when it comes to the need to let go of the juvenile idea that the world is a meritocracy, nothing could be more counterproductive than highlighting the illustrious case studies of how a self-made executive rose to the top of their companies based solely on the brilliance of their own technical acumen, their brilliance of their raw intelligence, or the brilliance of a unique set of rare and valuable skills that they have. If you're not discussing the strategies and tactics that these individuals used to mobilize support, marshal consensus, drive alignment, and even, if necessary, compel cooperation, if you're not talking about that as the reason why these individuals rise to prominence in their organizations, then you're painting the wrong picture. It's about mastering the art of influence and stakeholder management. Anything less offers an incomplete, at best, and potentially damaging, at worst, guide to effective leadership. The leadership development industry's perpetuation of the meritocracy myth carries a grave consequence, and that is a dysfunctional approach to wielding power once an individual reaches positions of authority. You see, by framing success as primarily self-made, we set the stage for our first major failure in leadership. By telling these individuals that they have got there themselves, all by themselves, based on their own brilliance, we set them up to abuse the power that they have been given, where the illusion of self-sufficiency leads to autocratic decision-making. And this leads to the last pet peeve of mine. Well, not the last, but the last one that I'm going to talk about today. The last pet peeve I have with some traditional leadership development programs, and that is a ton of them are built around uplifting cliches, proverbs, maxims, aphorisms, affirmations, and, let's face it, a bunch of fluff that sounds amazing in a conference room, but holds little water in the real world. Phrases like, be the change you wish to see, or synergy is the secret. All these phrases take center stage. It's the corporate equivalent of motivational posters featuring soaring eagles and sunlit mountain peaks. Captivating? Maybe. But practical? Hardly. I would dare to say that if lofty platitudes were the keys to effective leadership, we'd all be corporate titans by now, wouldn't we? These programs typically emphasize the importance of positive thinking, motivation, and personal development. Some of these sham programs, not all, to be fair, just some of these programs even weave in new age woo-woo mystic ideas like the law of attraction, where if you only just deeply think about what you really want, then you're going to manifest some positive outcomes. Jesus, kill me now. While it is entertaining, sprinkling this kind of mysticism into a leadership development program is like adding truffle oil to a Big Mac. It might make for a more interesting experience, but it probably won't win you a Michelin star, and it definitely won't make your burger any healthier or any more useful for your body. There is little evidence to suggest that these programs are effective in actually developing leaders who achieve noteworthy organizational accomplishments or transformational changes. By reducing complex leadership challenges to feel-good maxims, we're not just wasting time. We are actively undermining leadership's potential. A recent study even hinted at the corrosive impact of such programs on actual leadership skills, implying that this spoon-fed idealism could make you less effective in your role. In fact, some research suggests that these programs can actually have negative impact on leadership performance. In the end, we have a multi-billion-dollar industry where some service providers are churning out self-help seminars disguised as leadership training. Executives emerge out of these so-called self-help seminars with a heightened sense of self-importance, but are hardly better equipped to steer a team, never mind an entire organization, through today's labyrinthine business landscape. Because of this glaring oversight, this industry perpetuates our second fundamental failure of leadership, and that is the inability to cultivate leaders who can actually effectively wield power and navigate the murky waters of corporate politics because they believe in fantasies and magical thinking. Far from equipping leaders with critical skills to manage stakeholder interests and build strategic alliances and make tough decisions, these programs churn out individuals who, when push comes to shove, are actually very timid when confronted with the complex power dynamics of real-world organizations. In essence, these executives enter the arena of high-stakes decision-making armed with nothing more than, albeit beautiful words, but ultimately they're armed with no more than hollow words. The result is a squandering of power and influence at a level where every choice could determine the outcome of profits, jobs, and even lives. So, by adhering to this ridiculous curriculum mired in feel-good rhetoric, the industry is not just failing to add value, it is actively contributing to the dilution of leadership effectiveness. The world is complex, and we live in this world where we will naturally have divergent perspectives and oftentimes competing interests, all while we are working under the constraints of scarce resources. This makes all decision-making, by necessity and inherently, political processes. All of this is fraught with the challenges requiring far more than hero stories and quotable quotes. It's high time we pivot from these archaic approaches and focus on delivering real-world strategies that prepare leaders for the rough and tumble realities they will inevitably face. So here's the deal. Leadership isn't just about inspirational mantras or being the loudest voice in the room. It's about understanding the complex dance of organizational dynamics, power structures, stakeholder management, and so much more. While some books and courses do touch on these topics, many are too busy selling a polished, idealized version of leadership devoid of the gritty realities. Here's what I want you to remember. Up until now, the conventional teaching of leadership has always been flawed, and flawed in several ways. By ignoring the complexities of organizational dynamics and the need to be politically savvy in all expressions of our leadership, and by framing success as a simplified account primarily becoming the result of a heroic self-made unitary leader in perfect control of a unique set of skills, and by overemphasizing the importance of warm, fuzzy phrases over actual, practical influence tactics and political strategies. By doing all of that, we set the stage for two types of leadership failures. The first is the abuse of power, where the illusion of self-sufficiency leads to autocratic decision-making, ignoring the intricate dynamics of organizational politics. And the second is the reluctance to deploy power at all, the byproduct of an executive feeling ill-equipped to navigate the labyrinthine interdependencies and stakeholder expectations. You've heard me say this, and if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Power squandered by a coward is just as harmful as power abused by a tyrant. Neither strategy is sustainable, and both can cripple an organization. This false narrative doesn't just misguide aspiring leaders, it destabilizes the foundation upon which robust, agile, and durable organizations should be built. It's time to reframe the conversation. Effective leadership isn't just about individual qualities. It's about understanding and adeptly maneuvering within the existing power structures to achieve strategic objectives and create value. All right, let's wrap this up. The leadership industry is undeniably gigantic, as we've seen, with over 2.6 million academic entries in Google Scholar and over 148 million links on Google proper and over 117,000 books on Amazon and a market value that's worth over $62 billion a year. The leadership development market digital footprint is enormous, and it's not just the numbers. Leadership is woven deeply into the fabric of the organization. Everything from quantifiable, measurable performance metrics to the qualitative corporate culture. This is what I want you to remember. Conventional leadership development programs rarely explicitly address power dynamics in the organization, and consequently, they almost never examine the necessity to deploy political tactics. This results in two major leadership failures: the abuse of power by a tyrant and the squandering of power by a coward. Sure, not all programs are tone deaf to these nuances. So the next time you're shopping for a leadership development course or a leadership development book or a leadership development seminar, keep that in mind and ask yourself this question. Will this leadership development program elevate my executive effectiveness, or is it just a collection of feel-good platitudes that have no immediate practical application? The importance and urgency of mastering leadership is too critical to squander on misguided ideas.